We are doing so many required documents in Unit 1 here, and we're doing another one. So get out your Federalist 51 short read. It's a abbreviated version here, a Cliff Notes version of Federalist 51. I'm hitting the highlights. You are going to highlight, or you're using a document to do what I'm going to be doing and make sure that you save that. And then we'll have a one sheet page that hits the highlights that we can study, a study page. So we're going to do a short read here. It's important to get into these documents, actually read the words that were used in 1787, and to make the argument that the Constitution should be passed. All right, so Federalist 51 is, again, published in New York. Madison or Hamilton wrote it. There's a little bit of debate about which one, and it's writing here. The main idea is about separation of powers and why this new Constitution is a good thing and will protect liberty, because there are checks and balances in the system. So we're going to be looking at that. So go ahead and get your highlighter ready, get your sheet out, or your document that you're going to be kind of looking at. If you're doing a document on a computer, then maybe put up two windows and have them side by side so you can see what I'm doing, because I want you to keep up with me. Okay, here we go. So Madison or Hamilton write, or Publius writes. Okay, here we go. But the great security against a gradual concentration of the several powers. So let's just highlight this: the gradual concentration of several powers. So that's like the three branches in one person, right? So the power to make law, the power to enforce law, the power to interpret law, the judging power, all of those being in one person. Of course, that is by definition a dictator or tyranny. So let's continue and I'll start over. But the great security against a gradual concentration of the several powers in the same department, meaning the same branch, consists in giving to those who administer each department the necessary constitutional means and personal motives to resist encroachments on the others. So you want to resist encroachment on others. You want to give overlapping powers for the branches. So an example of this is the president can veto a law by Congress. Congress has the power to make law, but then the president has kind of constitutional means, this veto, and personal motives like his own power, his own personal, belief on policy to potentially veto laws of Congress. And then Congress has to take into consideration then the president's beliefs when they are making a law. So that's what they're talking about here. So like overlapping powers is going to kind of put checks on the different branches. Ambition must be made to counteract ambition. Ambition. Ambition is like the desire, kind of what I say about it, desire for power, you know, success, put it that way. So you have this idea of ambition. And here's the thing: politicians are often highly ambitious people, or they wouldn't run for office. They are people who want to accomplish things, they want to check things off, they maybe have certain things they want to get done. And so the idea here is to set up a system where ambitions in one branch will stop the ambitions of the other branch. And that will protect our liberty. That will protect against the usual end result of democracy, which is that one side wins control, they get 51% of power, and then they just ram down their program down the throats of the other side, and that either leads to war or it leads to a violation of rights. So what you do is you try to counteract the ambitions that are natural within human beings. So they're looking at human beings and saying, like, this is the way human beings are. We hate others. We don't get along very well. We often try to persecute people who believe differently than us. We often hate people who believe differently than us. By the way, if you doubt that, visit Twitter and social media, and you'll find out how true that is. And so the idea is that we need to create a government where we're counteracting the natural bad tendencies of human nature. It's really quite remarkable how they just look at human beings and are like, look, this is what humans are. Let's create a system that works, against that works with those natural inclinations against each other, and thus we get a result that is protecting human rights. It may be a reflection on human nature. Okay, yes, here we go. It may be a reflection on human nature that such devices should be necessary to control the abuses of government. Yeah, if the reflection on human nature is that human nature is not very good. Like, we're nasty to each other. In high school, we have people who bully each other. We have to be taught tolerance. We have to be taught to be nice to people who are different. Because ingrained in human beings is to not be tolerant of those who are different than us. So he's kind of saying like it's a reflection on human being that such devices are necessary to control the abuse of government. And by the way, what is government? People. So any problems that humans have, government will have. That's reality. One of my favorite lines in all the Federalist Papers, the next one. If men were angels, no government would be necessary. Yeah, yeah, right. If if people were perfect, then we don't need government. Why? Because we wouldn't steal, we wouldn't cheat, we wouldn't be jealous, we wouldn't hurt others, we wouldn't violate others' rights because we would be perfect. But since people aren't perfect, we need government. The question is how much. And the founders are trying to create a system that made sure that we didn't have too much government that ended up violating our fundamental natural rights. If angels were to govern men, he continues, neither external nor internal controls on government would be necessary. Yeah, we don't need like checks and balances on government if angels were ruling us because they would always do the perfect thing. But the reality is that the people who rule us are often corrupt, power hungry, ambitious, and they want to get their policy through. And oftentimes that policy might even hurt the side that they don't like. All right, so how do you set up a system that does that? In framing government, which is to be administered by men over men, meaning imperfect people ruling over imperfect people. That's what he's saying. The great difficulty lies in this. You must first enable the government to control the governed. So you must have the government have enough power to control the Shays Rebellion type people, the mob, the unruly mob. And the next place, oblige it to control itself. How do you get the government to control itself? Well, you get this counteracting, right? Ambition versus ambition. So how do you get it to control itself? Next, oblige to control itself. And that's where he's talking about checks and balances. He's talking about create checks and balances. That's how you get it to control itself. All right, here we go. A dependence on the people is no doubt the primary control on the government. So, a dependence on the people, what does he mean? He's talking about voting. So voting is a primary control on government. If government stinks, it does bad things, like people will vote the bums out. The problem is that we're voting in more bums. And so you have to keep control in the government. You need more than just that. But experience has taught mankind the necessity of auxiliary precautions. And auxiliary means more checks are needed than just people voting. It's not enough. It's not enough to just vote him in. Because I mean, look, Hitler got voted in by people. Hitler got voted in by people. So just people voting, that's not enough because people will, when desperate, do really crazy stuff. And this history is replete with these sort of examples. We see it particularly displayed in all these subordinate distributions of power, where the constant aim is to divide and arrange the several offices in such a manner as that each may be a check on the other. So what he's saying here is that, see, we'll see in our Constitution has divide and arrange the several offices. We want to have offices of, or the branches, when he says offices, branches of government aligned against each other. That's what he's talking about. Um, to check each other. Okay, so you're forceful. You're putting the government, the executive. You know, the president can veto laws by the Congress, but the Congress can overrule the president's appointment of judges. But the Congress can also say what the judges, who the judges, what sort of jurisdiction the judges have. But then the president gets to appoint them. Like there's all these overlapping things that check on each other. In Republican government, the legislative authority is necessarily predominates. So the most important power is the power to make law. Congress make law most powerful. That's the most powerful power according to the Constitution, according to the founders. The remedy for this inconveniency is to divide the legislature into different branches and to render them by different modes of election and different principles of action. So divide the legislature into different branches. And what they mean by that is a House, the bicameral, sorry, House, spell, and Senate. Can't really type. I can spell decently, but it's the typing aspect that I have here. I'm also under pressure, like I'm seeing on the video, trying to do it live. It's like, ah. All right. So yeah, so the Congress is so powerful. The legislature is so powerful. We need to divide it into two different branches. In this case, the House and Senate. In the compound Republic of America. So what does he mean by compound? A federal government. We have states and a national government. We have states and a national government. So that's what he means by a compound republic. The power surrendered by the people is first divided between two distinct governments, federal and state, and then the portion allotted to each subdivided among the distinct and separate departments. So, like, we have both national government, we have federal government, and then within each one we have executive, judicial, and branches. Judicial, federal, and executive. So each has judicial. I think I said that wrong again. Executive and legislative. So we subdivide each again among the three branches, judiciary, executive, and legislature. Hence, a double security arises to the rights of people because we have a federal government subdivided with executive, judicial, and legislative. Then we have a state government, and that's subdivided with legislative, judicial, and executive. So we keep creating these like overlapping problems here, which is good in order to protect your rights. Hence, a double security arises to the rights of the people. The different governments will control each other, so state, federal, state, at the same time that each will be controlled by itself. Why? Because of checks and balances and overlapping powers. In the Federal Republic of the U.S., all authority in it will be derived from the dependent on the society. The society itself will be broken into so many parts, interests, and classes of citizens. What does he mean by that? Into so many parts, interests, and citizens. Okay? He's talking about factions. We're going to have lots of factions that the rights of individuals or of the minority, again, that's the people who lose the election, will be in little danger of interesting combinations. So, like, if you win an election, you're happy. You think the government should have all this power. But what happens when you lose the next election? Because here's the thing, you will lose the next election. That's what happens. There will be time. There's no time in American history where like one state, one party has power for like ever. It just doesn't happen. It changes all the time. So even when you're in power, you have to realize that you better compromise because the other side will get power. You want to protect the power of the minority and take their rights into consideration because eventually you will be in the minority. All right. And we'll be in little danger of the interested combinations of the majority. So factions. So too many factions. This is kind of like Federalist 10. None at power. And that's a good thing. So it kind of goes back. That's a little Federalist 10 connection there. There's so many factions that none will get power. Okay. The next part of the lesson will be doing the required document down below, doing this part. So you'll need that out. We'll go ahead and do that next. Thanks.